Hey, it's Jackson with Happiness Means Business, back with another short video on how you can apply the science of happiness and human flourishing to improve your own results and your own quality of life, whether it's an individual or in the context of an organization. And in this week, we're going to talk about habits and particularly actual implementation of behavior change. How do you go from knowing intellectually to actually doing it? Because maybe you've had this experience where it's like January 10th, and you look over and see the two or three books that are sitting, accumulating dust on your nightstand, and your gym membership's still charged, but you haven't really been going so much, and you haven't been putting a lot of miles into those new running shoes, and this big, healthy fruit bowl you bought is starting to rot, and there's an open bag of Doritos in the cupboard. And so, despite you knowing that reading more, exercising more, and eating healthier were likely going to make you happier, it's not so easy to actually stick to those things after weeks and months. And in this short video, I'm going to try to give you some principles for how to stick to those things a bit better. And now this is not just a you thing or a me thing or something. This is actually something that Laurie Santos references. Now she's a professor at Yale University that teaches one of the most popular courses on happiness in the world. It's called The Science of Well-Being. It's got like 4.5 million students, I believe. And she calls it the G.I. Joe fallacy. If you know the cartoon G.I. Joe, the main character would always say, knowing is half the battle. And she's like, not really. If knowing were half the battle, we'd probably all have six-pack abs and be driving Ferraris and be these enlightened beings. But of course, if you take a quick look around, that's not the case. Knowing is a very small percentage of the battle. The important part is to go to doing and doing consistently. And I'm going to give you a few principles that may help with that. And I'll share a story that gets at kind of the main idea here. And so it's a term that I refer to this as going from habit building to habit engineering. Habits play an essential role in this. Habits are repeated behaviors. The word habit comes from habere and habitus, which means to have or consist of, and then the condition of or the state of. So it's sort of like your repeated conditions, right? So I often say that your life is the sum total of your habits. You pick any area of your life that you're satisfied with. What are your habits there? Well, you probably have some consistent habits. You pick an area of your life you're not so satisfied, you probably don't have very supportive habits there. So when we think about going from habit building to habit engineering, I'll give a quick story of this. This was years ago when I was a college student, and I was trying to get into the most popular bar on campus. It was the night of the national championship. There was a line of like 200 people. I think the cover charge to pay to get into the bar was like $200. And I was like, I just got to get in there. I have so much motivation. I have so much willpower. I'm so excited. I just got to get in there. And so I was like, well, can I climb over the fence? Can I bribe the bouncer? Can I just run in there? I started to realize that even though I really wanted to get in there, just willpower and motivation, desire were not enough. And so I went over to this takeout place right next door, got my brown paper bag, whatever, threw on a baseball cap, walked up to the bouncer and said, hey, I have an Uber Eats for Sarah in the back. And he was kind of like, what? And I was like, yeah, Sarah ordered Uber Eats. I don't know. And he's like, yeah, go ahead. And I walked right in. So that story is this idea that instead I used my creativity and my intelligence. And of course, you can use this for more than sneaking into a bar or something. You can use it to engineer different habits. So this shift I'm talking about is all about going from, I have this desire to change and I want to set these goals and resolutions, to saying, no, I'm going to use my kind of creativity, my intellect to engineer those new behaviors. So here are a set of principles you can keep in mind. And I'm going to read off this guide that we have. If you end up wanting this, feel free to just reach out. I'll include a link to it, but our habits-based implementation plan. The first rule, number one, is make it count. So that means, why is this important? Connecting it to an emotionally compelling reason for what's at stake. And an example of this, there's a story I heard where this guy was visiting his doctor, and the doctor comes in and he goes, hey, you have kids, right? He's like, yeah. He's like, oh, do you want to be around to play with your grandkids? And the guy's kind of like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And do you want to have enough energy to be the type of father, both emotionally and physically, that can be there for those grandkids and have fun with them and play with them? And the guy's like, yeah. And then he's finally like, and how do you like the thought of another man waking up next to your wife every morning? And at this point, the guy's like ready to fight him. He's like, dude, what are you talking about? And the doctor says, well, if you don't start exercising, you don't quit smoking, you don't drink less and get your diet in order and make these lifestyle changes, that's going to be the reality. And boom, right? Think of the emotional, compelling reason behind this, as opposed to if the doctor would have just said, hey, you should probably be a little more active and eat a little healthier, etc. So that's somewhat of a dramatic example. But it's true that behaviors that are incongruent with our identity and our core beliefs about ourselves likely will not last. So when we say make it count, we say try to think of how a new behavior that you're trying to implement or a new goal you're trying to pursue relates to your core identity of who you want to be and how you want to be, right? So maybe if it's, I want to read a little bit more, it's not just, oh, I think it'd be a good idea. It's, no, I want to be an intellectual. I want to grow as a person, and I want to be the type of person who has this intellectual depth to be able to share with my kids and my family and friends. So visualizing as well what's at stake if you do it and if you don't do it, and making it emotionally compelling related to your identity. That's number one. And I'm going to try to fly through these. I usually do this over the course of a 50-minute training, but I'm trying to keep this video a little shorter. Next one is making an easy plan. So big thing we see go wrong is you say, I want to start running more, and so I'm going to run 10 miles every day. And after 2 days, you're just spent. So start by scaling it down to something easy. You have to have a habit in place before you can improve on it. I'll repeat that. You have to have a habit in place before you can improve on it. So think you're trying to rig the game in your favor to build momentum. What's something so easy I can just check it off and do it every single day? So I'm going to run a marathon becomes 4 times a week, I'm going to run a mile. Or 4 times a week, I'm going to lace up my running shoes and go for a minimum of 10 minutes. I'm going to read 10 books this year. I'm going to read more becomes I'm going to read a page a day. And with that, you want to make a plan. You ever had this happen? You run into an old friend and you're like, oh, that was great to see you. We should catch up. Yeah, no, we should catch up. And then what happens? Something as simple, and there's some good literature on this. It's called an implementation intention. Simply saying when and where and potentially the duration of when you're going to do the behavior makes you far more likely to follow through. So once again, you're defining your goal or your new behavior in specific behavioral terms and when and where you're going to do it. So once again, if you say, I want to get better work-life balance, well, what does that goal actually mean? Well, in behavioral terms, specifically with an implementation plan, might be something like every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday at 5:30 p.m., I'm going to disconnect my work email, close my laptop, and put it in a different room, and I'm not going to get it until the next morning. Or it might be every Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. is protected time for dinner with my family or a friend, and I execute that consistently. So again, you're going and defining it in behavioral terms and trying to make it something easy. Next one, change your environment. All right, so when I lived as a Zen monk, it was really easy for me to not drink, not smoke, not eat meat, and meditate 4 or 5 hours a day most days, simply because my environment had changed. If I tried to do all those things right now, well, granted, I don't smoke, but if I tried to just go maybe a week without a drop of alcohol and eating vegetarian and meditating for 20 some hours, it would require a massive overhaul because my contextual environment isn't aligned. So think about how can you design both physically or socially a more supportive environment. So I want to eat healthier means I'm going to buy a bunch of fruit and leave it out on the counter, and I'm going to stop buying junk food. I'm going to read more means I actually did this once. I want to read for 10 minutes right after breakfast. I'm going to leave my book in the refrigerator so that I see it right in front of me. So think about how you can create a supportive environment. And then the final one is just doing what you can to create accountability, which means having a tracking system and rewards in place. So is it a daily checklist? Is it a thing on your calendar that you mark off? It could be a jar of marbles that you put a marble into every time you do your behavior. And then rewards is trying to make sure you recognize your own progress. And oftentimes for these things that have a delayed reward, like Exercise requires some upfront sacrifice and you get the benefit later. Saving money, upfront sacrifice, get benefit later. Can you do something to bring in a shorter term reward to keep that motivation going? Like, hey, maybe if I hit 5 workouts this week, I treat myself to a little bit of a nice dinner. Or maybe if this month, I say I'm going to save an extra $100 a week. If I hit my goal this month at the very end, I'm going to buy myself a $15 bottle of wine and celebrate, whatever. The idea is you're making those rewards that are often way in the future a little bit more immediate. So there you have it. If you think about a behavior or goal you're trying to get to, start by trying to define it in behavioral terms, like what is the habit, the recurring behavior that's going to lead to that? Then you're going to want to make it count, connect it to emotionally compelling statements about your identity, make it so easy you never miss, and have a plan in place for when and where you're going to do it. Change your environment to make it more supportive, and then have system in place for rewards and accountability. And if you do that, odds are you're going to stick to this new habit or new behavior much more effectively than you would have otherwise relying just on motivation and willpower. So I hope that's helpful. And if you want more of this content, just let us know. And otherwise, we'll see you in the next one.